Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth and final budget workshop. I will say this many times, but I'll start saying it first right off the bat. Thank you. Thank you for participating and being involved in these one afternoon and 3 evenings of work you've been doing on the budget. We very much appreciate your energy and effort. And you're in the home stretch. This is it for tonight. At the conclusion of this evening's meeting, there will be a recommendation from the group that next Monday evening in this very room, Lynn, as your representative, will come up and make a presentation to the City Council at a special meeting, reporting out the results of all of this. We are working in the meantime to continue to try to get the budget together. The staff's anxiously awaiting the results of this process so that we can put the final touches on a budget we've been working on for several months, the details of which we hope to have available to our staff and to the public no later than Friday, the 18th of December. And then there will be budget hearings and decisions by the City Council during the months of January and February, with the budget being adopted hopefully no later than February 28th for the fiscal year starting March 1. So with that, we're ready to go. We are on live television this evening on Channel 16. We will be repeated throughout the course of the week, and then beginning at noon on Friday, we are starting a budget workshop marathon on Channel 16. We will be showing all 4 workshops back to back starting at noon on Friday, continuing 24 hours a day through Sunday at 6 p.m., and the marathon will conclude with a live call-in show at Evanston Community Media Center to allow residents to provide feedback and to ask any questions at a call-in program. Probably last about an hour live on Sunday, the 6th of December, beginning at 6 p.m. So again, thank you for all the work that you've done. Unless there's any initial questions, we'll give it to Lynn.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to go around the room and ask each of you to say your name. I think we have a mic somewhere which has, do we not? So that we don't have to use the one with the cord. And then we'll bring that around the room, and each of you can introduce yourself. And if we don't have that handy right this minute, we'll do something else and then come up with that in just a couple minutes. It seemed to have disappeared. Okay. That's great. Please just pass it around.
Richard Locke.
Mike Vasulko.
Bill Smith.
Robert Muno.
Jim Hughes.
Jadad Risky.
Liz Gordon.
Mark Sloan.
Precious Wright.
Sue Calder.
Bill Arndt.
Bonnie Wilson.
Chris Ernst.
Kevin O'Connor.
John Sorensen. Carl Bova.
Pat Corey Rossi.
Jane Woolley.
Bill Geiger.
Marcia Achenbach.
John Pryther.
Fred Rakowski.
Craig McClure.
Vito Brigliera.
Christian Sorensen.
Bruce Ennenbach.
Sherry Ann Robertson.
Jim Corey Rossi.
And there are a couple people who just came in.
Over here.
Hi. Mary Schroeder. Betty Esther.
We'll get that on the microphone so you can be heard.
Betty Esther.
Mary Beth Schroeder.
Excellent. Thank you again for being here. It's really a privilege to be in a room with a group of people that voluntarily gives their time to make their community a better place. And I think that not only do you all deserve a great deal of gratitude from the rest of the community, but also from the staff and the City Council, because these are difficult times, difficult budget times, and your contributions, your discernment, your willingness to simply reflect and think through some of the issues is part of what it takes. It's very difficult at times for people to go along with this idea, but reflection really is an action step. Reflection gives you some opening, a space, so that you can actually let some concept sink in and also to let some creativity come out. And so you did that in the second workshop, and then last time worked very diligently to create some great ideas. So I'm going to just go over the process again for you. On November 7th, you had that 5-hour orientation beginning early in the morning, and all of you qualified to be a participant as a result of being there. Since then, you worked on the conversation, that reflection conversation about what are the essential attributes of our community that we want to see for 2011. Last time developed the budget recommendation options that are part of this many-page document that you have in front of you. Tonight we'll be selecting recommendations from those. We'll probably, if possible, select 2 or 3 from each category that you will, not by a form of consensus process, but a winnowing process, make a selection from the ideas that you have already developed. And then finally on December 7th will be the presentation to the City Council. That's a week from today in these chambers, and I really hope that not only you will be there, but some of you also may assist me in certain aspects of that presentation if that's possible. So we have a proposed agenda today, and as you will see on the green sheets in your bin, that is the agenda, and I marked it proposed because I actually want to go over it with you and get your feedback on it as to how I planned for this or designed for this experience to go, and make sure that it seems to work for you. So in just a few minutes here, we'll be reviewing the quantitative analysis that's in the multi-page spreadsheet that you have in front of you. We will do that in dialogue with department directors where needed. So they are here in the room willing to help us. We have an opportunity to ask more questions of clarification about the quantification of the various ideas that we have put forward. After that segment, I'm calling the following one a kind of a discernment process where we may add to the recommendations, we may amend some of those that we've already offered, and otherwise refine that universe of recommendation options that we want to use as our field from which we'll select the recommendations we're making to the City Council. We'll go through a selection process and then have a conversation about the presentation of next week and how what kind of guidance you might like to give to me as your spokesperson at that event. So that's the proposed agenda for the evening. I know it's vague, but I don't think we want to go into the details. We can offer those ideas as we go along. Any questions or concerns about the proposed agenda? Okay. Some meeting outcomes I would like to go over and see what you think of these. And the first is to examine the quantitative analysis that the city staff provided, and then to make some final inquiries of the directors. Then we'd like to improve the universe of vision options by adding, amending, or removing items from consideration, selecting 2 to 3 of the strongest recommendations in each of those 6 categories that we identified last time, and then ready for presentation to the City Council. I hope that's doable. If you're up for it, let's give it a try. Any questions, comments, concerns about that? Yes? Not necessarily, but it's convenient. Yeah, it's not really necessarily your assignment. What he was referring to is there are short charts near each of the tables where we might be doing some of the discernment process and offering the selections of the universe of recommendation options. But we'll get to that point a little bit later. Okay, so just a few assumptions let's go over quickly. The city must adopt a balanced budget for fiscal year 2010-2011, projections showing an approximate budget deficit of $8 to $9 million. The community and the staff are focusing attention and creativity to identify the best ways of creating a balanced budget. So we're looking for just and equitable approaches. Everyone is in it for the right reasons. And we you have definitely committed your time freely and your talent to doing this discernment. So we have the 6 categories now that have been identified: improved efficiencies, changes to the levels of service, cost containment, non-tax revenue strategies, general revenue strategies, and any other innovations. Okay, so this is the opportunity for us to take a look at the document, and there is new information on here. In fact, the staff was working up to today at 4:30, so some of your recommendations, you may find actually some additional staff recommendations beyond those you might have seen on the website. Did most of you take a look at this on the web? And so you have some familiarity with the recommendations that and the responses by staff. That's really very important. And we're looking to see whether or not we need to amend, refine these, and just a few criteria we settled on last time, that any additions should be of short-term or long-term fiscal benefit, or make it possible to decrease expenditures or result in increased revenue. So many of the things on the spreadsheet were kind of vague, grand ideas, really good thoughts, but not quantifiable and not really meeting the test of what can happen to help us balance this budget. So we will not be voting on every single item in this multi-page document. You have a chance to take a look at what's in here now, and we can go through it by category. There's a question, Suzanne?
Just from the staff, if the staff could respond, for every $1 million that we are...
Let me get you the microphone.
For every $1 million that, how much does $1 million cost in increases in taxes?
I think it's on, but you need to...
How much does $1 million cost in increases of taxes? How much does $1 million cost in increase in taxes? For a homeowner, or a percent?
With our the city's tax bill at $38 million, and that's about 20% of your tax bill right now. So $1 million increase is going to be about 2.5% increase on that. So that's if you're looking at your tax bill for, I don't know what everyone's tax bill is, but it's a 2.5% increase to the cities, but it's 2.5% of 20%. So it's only about a 0.5% increase on the tax bill. So if you have, I'll make easy math, for every $1,000 of a tax bill, it's a 0.5% or $5. On $1,000, 0.5% would be 0.5%. No, $5. $5.
Can we all agree that we're going to use the mics?
So you're using a $38 million figure, but I'm looking at the info we got at that Saturday workshop, and I think I'm reading this correctly. It says property tax is 16 million in revenue. Okay. And we're talking about the general fund in terms of this eight or $9 million gap, are we not? So you're talking 38 million, but some of that's going into other things. So I think maybe your math needs to be doubled to get to the figure that this would involve. Each $1 million here.
Not necessarily. Well, actually, you are right. The one way to put it, $1 million will have a commensurately larger impact on the general fund deficit if that's where the city council directs the money to go to. So if there's $1 million increase in the general tax levy, not the police pension tax levy, fire pension tax levy, or debt service levy, if it's specifically pointed right at the general fund, then it will have a large increase on the deficit, but it would still have that same impact that I related regarding an impact on a homeowner's tax bill.
So, I mean, if we wanted to close the gap and go home, we can just all say, I vote for a 56% increase in my property tax, in my city property taxes next year, and, I go home, I'm done. But I don't think we want that.
That is up to this group to decide.
Marty, on the TIFs, I know next month, starting tomorrow sometime, is the annual meeting. And they said this was on the website, but I didn't see it. Do you know what the surpluses, if any, are on any of the TIFs and how those would be directed towards maybe closing the budget deficit?
We don't have what he's referring to as the Downtown 2 TIF, which is our very first TIF that we did in Evanston, is closing December 31st. So we are anticipating somewhere between a $1 and $2 million ending balance in the TIF that is scheduled to go, per previous discussions with the council, to the parking fund to pay on debt for the Sherman Avenue garage, which still has multi-million-dollar debt service payments due on it. So that's a allowable and a good use to pay that debt service down. We would not be eligible to take that surplus and use it to balance the general fund. You could do a lot of transferring here, there, and everywhere to get there, but I think that kind of accounting is not where we want to be. We're first looking at the whole service discussion that we're talking about tonight. So you would normally, if there's surplus, it would go to all of the taxpayers. So I would say this: if it stayed as $1 million, $200,000 could go towards a one-time payment to the general fund for closing the next year's budget gap, but it wouldn't help structurally.
What about the other TIF districts, not just downtown too?
The next one doesn't close until 2017.
But even if it's not closed, are those things allowed to be moved anywhere else?
You're not allowed to. We are allowed to spend on operating expenses that would not have been undertaken if the TIF wasn't there. So we can have special details, improved marketing, higher level of streetscape, things of that nature that we wouldn't have done without the TIF. But I can't just say that the West Evanston TIF is now going to have its police force paid for out of the TIF fund. We have to have some kind of additional duties. And we have worked on that very hard. I think the city does as much as it can in utilizing TIF funds wherever possible. But we do also try to restrict them to development.
I have a two-part question. The first part is, have you taken into account the dramatic increase in tax revenues from this year's tax bills for last year and what that's going to mean for next year? And the other part of the question is, and maybe the 15 or 20 people that I've talked to that have appealed their market value assessments, we've found comparable properties that are selling for about 25% less than the market value that were appraised at this year. So are we taking into account what will shake out finally over the next couple of years when the actual market value of these properties declines roughly 20 to 25%?
I'd have to say, unfortunately, yes and yes. So we have taken into account the increases that everyone saw on their second installment this year were those that was the tax levy approved in February of 2008 budget, levied last December, and now collected this December. So there was approximately a 7% increase in the city portion and a 4% increase in all of the school portions. And then you have reassessments going up and down. That's what created that large stir recently. As far as future years go, we levy on a dollar basis. So if property values do decrease, what's going to happen is that the rate, which is currently our rate, is 1.295%. That rate would jump if values went down by 25%. The rate would go to 1.5, 1.6, and that we'd still collect the same $38 million, assuming that was the direction. So the property values don't impact the amount of the levy collected. Once a governing body says we're going to collect X amount of dollars, the county will distribute it in a manner necessary to collect it, regardless of the value of the property being taxed.
Well, the reason I asked that question, my colleague added up all the numbers that you put on this rebuttal to most of the suggestions, and he points out that it only goes halfway in covering our current debt if, in fact, the city council is going to have to raise taxes or raise the rate to generate the same amount of funds. Aren't they going to have to look at the cuts and the kinds of efficiencies that mostly have been dismissed in this sheet?
Yes, they would if that was where we were at. But the goal is between this process, the staff suggestions, the council review, is to get to that $8 million level. The goal is not to raise the property tax to cover that $8 million. So, for instance, there's not much in here where we've costed out layoffs. And we are costing that out. And that we have suggestions from this group, so that will be in a proposed budget where we balance.
There's a question over here.
Why are we looking at just 1 year? Why aren't we doing a 5-year projection of potential revenues and costs? We know, for instance, that the police and fire pension funds are going to have to be increased. Assuming that the state does not delay the redemption, the full amount necessary by 2033, I have a rough calculation. We've got to put in $549 million between now and 2033. That includes, the money we're putting in now plus the incremental to cover the deficiency that we have there. We should be looking at a 5-10-year window. This is just a Band-Aid.
Two things. Our goal for the general fund operating is that the cuts we make, the changes based on what you've given us, will be long-term. They will be ongoing, where our goal is not to have one-time revenues, sale of property, transfer, et cetera, to cover. And then secondly, the pension funds are an issue that the city is committed to, and it will be a balancing act every year, but as we related in September, we do have a plan for the next 30 years on what it will cost.
My only other comment would be I would suggest if the group feels the city needs to have a long-range financial plan, that'd be an excellent recommendation for you to make.
And there were a couple of blanks in there, and when we get to, if we didn't want to go through those until we exhausted everything, but in some of the blanks, it's an ongoing process. So some of them were general questions, so I was just going to say a few syllables about those answers, but if I didn't want to get in the way of okay. For the very first question regarding the commissions, boards and commissions, we have already identified over $100,000 in actual hard dollar staff costs, and that's just from 3 reporting departments that cover a multitude of commissions, but it is over $100,000. We'll get that memo posted as quickly as possible. It's actually going to be many memos, and we're consolidating right now.
I'm sorry, Marty, I didn't quite understand that.
For the boards and commissions, the question was, how much do we spend on supporting all of the boards and commissions? So we've begun that process, and we have already identified over $100,000 in minute-taking time, staff time, research time, agenda preparation time, all of those things that are done by staff in support of the commissions. So what I said was we'll get a consolidated memo that identifies all of the rest of them. It's still just I have a few departments to go. But there are substantial costs for the boards and commissions.
Well, then what would you recommend that we do with the boards and commissions? I mean, I don't quite understand.
The question was to identify how much cost we had, and some of the things could be, do we have more volunteerism in staffing the boards and commissions? We have a very great resource in these public bodies. So before I call into question the efficiency of them, I'd want to look at it overall. The question was, though, just how much do we spend?
But didn't the League of Women Voters and the city's law department work for like 2 years to analyze the boards and commissions and make a bunch of recommendations about that we ought to cut some of them?
And we, in fact, are.
Okay. So some of them are being consolidated or going away.
I believe we had 5 or 6 that were recommended for disbanding. We had a question 12 in the first set, ask lobbying groups to prioritize demands, and it says COGS, that stands for Council of Government. And the Northwest Municipal Conference is our local council of government, and they do have a prioritized agenda setting for the lobbying efforts at Springfield. As the council pointed out, we do want to step that up. That needs to be even more aggressive. The other one, number 10, which noted, consider shared services, school, city, accounting, technology, building services. We had a fairly generic answer there, but when you start to look at what happens if we have a shared accounts payable, a shared payroll, a shared 2 or 3 technology individuals, the savings could be $500,000, $1 million that would be split amongst all of the groups because we will have to have somebody someplace still doing the activities. And that would take intergovernmental agreements and some training because we don't share software right now. So there would be some issues, and I see that as a long-term issue that we need to continue to look at.
Number 9, implement staff suggestions. My understanding is that the department heads had gone through some exercises in cutting their own budgets. I think part of that question was to disclose what those department heads had come up with in terms of budget cuts. So the fact that it's still being evaluated is distressing when essentially what we were asking for was daylight on what the staff felt these cuts would look like.
Those are actually available on the web. All of those staff recommendations, there are 22 pages. Did others see that? Many of you have. Okay. They are available.
What we are working on that, though, is also where there were recommendations to also follow up on if the recommendation didn't reference a quantity or an impact, then to also try and respond to that, just like we're doing with these.
Did those, so
They're
I
not
guess
all
the
on the web
follow-up
yet.
question is, would those staff recommendations make up for the gap?
They will be included in the ideas to make up the gap, definitely.
Do they make up the gap entirely?
I don't have that answer.
Okay. Number 12,
Let me just add, this is a real process, folks. There's no budget document anywhere until this process is done. And so I want to hear from you all. We're finished tonight. We'll present to the council on the 7th. The budget's due by December 31. So as far as, we're going to take whatever you have. If everything that this group submits is worth $12 million, then you've made my life really easy. If the ideas that you think are important are worth something less than $8 million, then my job is to come up with other reductions and to come up with.
but clearly there was guidance regarding the exercise, right? I mean, what was the guidance? The guidance was?
The guidance was to reach out to the community of Evanston to get their best ideas on how to.
No, I mean to staff.
The staff, there was no guidance. Their guidance was, you work here every day. Please tell us what you think we should do to be more efficient and more effective. And so we got 22 pages of ideas.
I see.
Yeah, it definitely was not as structured as this.
Number 12, renegotiate labor contracts to reduce wages and benefits for new hires. 5. Negotiable item with collective bargaining units. Collective bargaining commences with 2 of the 4 bargaining units in December. What are those 2 units? Because on the budget preview, I have 3 out of 4 contracts are up for renewal.
Yeah, the only contract we have right now is the sergeant's contract, and we have the Teamsters, which is for the police bargaining unit, is still in negotiations for last March 1st, so that's going to arbitration. And so we have the AFSCME, American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, and we have the fire union. Those are up for the March 1st, 2010. So that's when the contract ends that we currently have and the new one begins. So those are the 2 out of the 4 that's referenced in your note. Just on that same page while you're there, the 13 right below that, we had job reductions based on performance reviews. That can be considered in our non-bargaining areas. However, on the bargaining unit side, that's really governed by the contract, which I think in all cases is seniority driven. And then the next one, 14, just one correction on the defer merit increases. The $2 million is for merit and cost of living. Apologize, so that should say, you could put COLA, cost of living adjustment, is what happens if that's deferred. And to the point of long term, when you do defer that, that's a savings for a long time. That getting that deferral is, yes, 1 year, but that reduces the base forever, unless you do a catch-up in a future year.
Question?
Yes, sir.
Over here. So it seems like if we're going to get any cost savings, most of it's going to have to come from reducing the number of employees, because personnel costs are obviously the largest part of the budget. And one of the larger areas is parks and recreation. So they do lots of different things, and it might be helpful to think about, well, if we had less people, then what is the city not going to be able to do? So, for example, if the city decided that residents are responsible for the parkway trees and the city is not going to do anything with them, for example. I mean, is it possible to quantify this? Is it possible to figure out, if we drop down 3 employees or whatever, what we're going to have to give up in terms of the services? Can you give us any direction in that regard?
And we actually, this has been a subject that has come back and forth to the council what was it, Doug, about 7 or 8 years we went to the a shorter time frame on pruning and maintenance of the trees, because if you think back 8 or 9 years ago, we had ice storms and you had whole trees and everything down everywhere. So we went to a smaller cycle to help prevent that catastrophic cleanup where you'd spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on the cleanup. And not to mention potential loss of life and property damage. It could be parkway trees damaging private residences, et cetera, when they do go down. But yes, short answer, you can quantify that. You can say, what happens if we change our cycle back to a longer duration? What happens if we quit? Is that a request that you'd like to see how much we spend on forestry dollars?
I don't know. I submitted to the group.
Don't you think people?
I don't think we're not doing Robert's rules. We didn't need seconds on any of the others, so it's up to you. Then also we should have. I went to page 6, number 20, where it says eliminate pension plan for new hires. We do have a longer note, and I'm just not quite sure. It was a part of a legal response, so we'll get that in there right away. But our 3 pension plans are governed by state statute. So for anyone who's hired for a full-time position, they have to be in one of those 3 pension plans. There are some exceptions. If we have a retired police chief who comes here to work, they don't necessarily have to be in one because they've already been covered by another city's pension plan. But for the most part, everybody's covered under those 3 plans. I think the defined contribution that you see running through here, that's something that's gaining steam, but it's going to take a long time. And it may be that bifurcated plan, that hired after this date is in the new plan, hired before is not. That will have a huge impact. I know some folks will think, well, that's not going to be a big impact. That will have a huge impact in our police and fire unfunded liability. Every single year, that liability will drop off of its own accord as we start to have more people in defined contribution and less in defined benefit. So it's not just that, that's going to take care of the new ones. That will also reduce our liability as we go through the process. So that can have benefits on both sides. I'm hurrying, Lynn, sorry.
Oh, could I ask a quick question back on page 1? If the branch library, if North Branch was sold, where would that money go? What?
Up to the city council. So it could go capital, it could go general fund, but that...
Could it go into a fund that would support the ongoing services of the library?
Whatever the council decides.
Or we could suggest to them?
But yes, ultimately wherever the council decides. Maybe when we're at the end of questions and time to move forward.
Yeah, I don't want to monopolize, that's why...
No, it's all right. Okay.
I think it's number 50, the Northwestern University issue on page 13. And I think Northwestern was brought up a number of times in the prior workshops. All we've been told is that the mayor and the city manager are negotiating with Northwestern, but what exactly is happening? Because they've got a $5.6 billion endowment. Their president gets paid $1.75 million annually. They own 240 acres of taxable property in Evanston. So how about another bone for the rest of us?
Again, these discussions far predate me. They've been ongoing discussions. I think, again, if the committee feels that it's a priority for the city to look to Northwestern University for additional resources, then that would be an appropriate recommendation.
How are your discussions going?
They continue. The mayor and I have met with President Shapiro and Mr. Sunshine on a couple different occasions and have additional meetings scheduled. We're going to continue to try to bring as many resources as we can. Again, the purpose of these workshops, if you think that's one of the 3, 6, 9 things that you want to recommend to the council there'd be special emphasis on, then that's an appropriate recommendation if you so choose.
Marty, it said in here, I can't remember which page, to keep open the Howard Street outreach post. Do we rent or own that? Anybody know? Okay. And then I'm happy to see actually that on page 15, number 7, file for bankruptcy, that the staff took that seriously, and it says that the city's current financial condition may require filing of a bankruptcy petition, and also the effect that would have on perhaps labor agreements. That's kind of interesting to read. And then
before you get off that, just to make sure that there's no confusion, while it remains an option, there are many, 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 many things that remain an option, and we have no plans to ask the city council to consider anything regarding bankruptcy.
And Lynn, should I've got one idea I was going to try and present next week, but because I didn't work out the details, should I do this now or in group or what? Okay, all right.
Okay,
I think maybe if there's other individual questions, we'd be happy to answer them as the groups are meeting. But I think in the interest of time, we're at 10 to 8, and we want to be out by 10. So if that's all right with the group, we'll move forward. Oh, there was one more. I'll promise one more.
Let me. Sorry. One of the things that was discussed about federal funds, and we have things like shovel-ready projects. I don't know how much money is left in the federal stimulus plan, but to what extent can the city cut back on its budget for fixing roads, for example, and instead rely more upon the federal monies for that? Another way of stretching out, like trees and trimming, you can also stretch out dealing with the roads. And I was wondering
and
if
again,
there's any
that could
trade-offs.
very well be an appropriate recommendation if the group so chooses. I think the practical application of it is a little bit more difficult. There are currently no other road projects through the stimulus available. That was a one-cycle deal, and so that has not been done. We continue to have what you would call shovel-ready projects ready to go should that come to pass, because we continue to look at road infrastructure as well as specifically water and sewer infrastructure. So if those things were to come to pass, we could do that. If the council chooses to halt all capital funding, that is something they could choose to do, and then shift that money into other things. Generally been used as one-time monies, but it certainly could be used as for ongoing expenses if that was the will of the council.
On the water side, we were able to, if you recall, last year at this time, we had a capital planning meeting noting that we should be seriously considering a rate increase, and that was deferred until this year because of lower pumpage. The ARRA and other federal funding combined with staff looking at staging projects a little differently, we have really been able to hold the line on both water and sewer. They're in similar conditions that they were a year ago, which is great news because we still don't have the same level of usage. That's, from a conservation standpoint, great, but so that's not been a huge issue this year in the budget process.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take the privilege of the facilitator for a moment. I can't find where this is located, but there was a recommendation in here that was rather vague, but it said utilize greater volunteers or more volunteers and more interns. And the staff response related to partnership with schools. And obviously, when we think of internships, we do think of people in training in some way, shape, or form. But there are also the potential, I think, exists for volunteerism that isn't necessarily youth or people in training, but adults, people who are talented and capable who can fulfill certain things. And there was a reference somewhere about utilizing those in the libraries, et cetera. I wanted to pose a question to the department directors, and perhaps whoever has portable microphone can be handy for this to see if any of the department directors have contemplated utilization of a volunteer corps. I mean, clearly within the police area, we have the Citizen Academy, and that is a very important and very, very critical aspect of volunteerism that is adjunct to the police department. Are there other departments, or is there anyone else in the department directors that might be able to speak to the potential for volunteers? Okay, so for those of you who couldn't hear, that's being looked at citywide in all departments. That's very helpful to know. Okay, thank you. Any other things before we move to our next segment then? Yes?
Has there been brought up an idea of like selling, say, has there been the idea brought up of selling maybe things that the city does not need, say, like art objects?
Okay.
May not raise a lot of money, but it would be something to consider.
Okay. Let's bring that up in our conversation at our tables coming up right now, okay? So this would be an opportunity for us to do some work together again in groups. There are many pages, especially the cost containment category has many, many pages of ideas. What I'd like us to be able to do is to record on flip charts, and I gave you templates to start with for every category, to record those things that you want to see voted upon. That is, there are many things in this document that really don't lend themselves to consideration as an option, but we may want to amend or improve or add items, and then create a universe of options for recommendation. The way the templates are set up is that you would enter in the large horizontal rectangle the idea, let's just say the solid waste proposal. By the way, I want to reference the several documents that were addenda to this and that are referenced in this. There's a copy of each one of those in the bin on your table. Let's just say the option B in the solid waste document is something that people want to see voted on. You would put that in the large horizontal box on the flip chart in the category it falls in, which I think is cost containment, but I'm not positive about which category that's in. And then later on, when we have that list, we're going to cast votes, and everyone will get a certain number of dots, and you will be able to express your viewpoint about whether or not what are the top items in each category that you support. Yes, Mary Beth. Could we have a microphone for her?
Thank you. We don't have the memo about closing the fire station or reducing new engine. I don't know if anybody else does, but we've only got the
I have an extra
solid
here.
waste one
I
here.
have an extra if you need it. There should be one at every table. Okay. It's found. All right. Someone asked, well, is the category that's near my table the one that I should work with? And I would suggest that would be a good way to start. And then you ought to feel free to make sure that the ideas you think need to be expressed are on the flip chart that is connected with that category. But I think to prevent complete and sheer chaos, why don't we give it 10 minutes and each group take your flip chart and work on that, and we'll stop and take a break and see how did that go, what is it looking like, how did this work? Is that a deal? Okay. So I'll give you 10-minute conversation at your table. Please pull a flip chart near you and list those things you think belong on there as potentials, the universe of recommendations on which you will vote.
Because I don't see them reconfiguring the Civic Center to know what space they need for another. And the way we move. This is just just renting space. I think that's oh, that's okay.
You know, I mean, that's such a huge cost. And you're getting but the point is, if somebody else
It's a state account. Just like Is it now? Yeah. The other side is it's me, it's these two sort of organizations.
Are we sure?
And part of that
Take two.
exclusively used.
Well, they want to have that sworn off as an
Right. That's right. I mean, for example, could there be some weekends where it could be rented out? No, I'm saying that they, I don't know. That's what
Have we, as a rental agreement, have we our
But I mean, rental revenue would not be significant. And, you know, that's another reason, like,
or itself, you know, but then the very first comment.
but it's
That's what
I know.
But it's still, I think